In this lesson, we're going to commence a proofing campaign. Proofing is a term from traditional dog training. It means, prove to me, dog, that you really have this down. Prove to me you can do this if I change the conditions. Once a basic behavior is installed, it's well known to trainers the kinds of challenges that will make that behavior fall apart. Distraction and competing motivations we have already started to proof, and we will be doing more. Context change is the other big one. A new context might actually be less distracting than the familiar context in which the behavior was originally trained. Its newness alone causes the breakdown of behavior. Dogs, unlike humans, are not good generalizers. New locations throw them for a loop, you standing a different way throws them for a loop, a new handler throws them for a loop, and on and on. They can become better generalizers via that learning set phenomenon, the one we surfed with all those impulse-controlled behaviors, but they're not naturals at generalization, which we'll see in this lesson. We are going to have to practice context change to hone that basic skill. So what's the difference between competing motivation, a distraction, and a generalization problem? Let me give you a human example. Let's say you attend martial arts classes and you memorize via practice a form, a set series of movements. And let's say you practice this always facing the same direction in the training studio. Then one day you turn 90 degrees, and when you attempt to do the previously fluent form, you have some stutters, some memory lapses. This would be a generalization problem. Now let's say on another occasion you attend class and make errors because there's an ongoing troubling issue at work or at home that you can't get out of your head. That's a distraction. Finally, you might discover there's a dance class that has just started in your neighborhood, but it's at exactly the same time as your martial arts class and you sign up for dance class. That's competing motivation. In this last example, you can see that it doesn't matter how well you have memorized the form or what direction you're oriented, you're not even showing up to class. Similarly, in dog training, before anything else, clarifying what we want the dog to do and proofing it for different contexts so it's well generalized, we've got to get the dog to show up. That's why at the very beginning, I pounded that theme. No motivation, no training. There are two broad strategies for manipulating motivation. In animal training jargon, we call them establishing operations and abolishing operations. An establishing operation is just the basic measure of making sure the motivator we want to dispense to manipulate behavior is effective. When you're thirsty, water is established as a usable reinforcer. When you're hungry, food is established. The flip side of this coin is being saturated on a motivator. That motivator is then said to be abolished. So, right after a huge Thanksgiving feast, food is abolished. In drivey dogs, the ones who compulsively fetch over and over with undiminished intensity, fetch is never abolished. Now, it's a clunky motivator to dispense, but technically it's a bottomless well. Some dogs are really foodie, and it doesn't take much to establish food. They might have just had dinner, but they'll train for an hour for little treats. And that might include small, dry, unpalatable treats. Other dogs need to skip a meal or two and be offered roast chicken. It's all fine. Our job as competent trainers is to not leave any of this to chance. We do what it takes to get the job done. This means we establish motivators we want to use, and when appropriate, we abolish our competition. You'll see this later on in our proofing campaign when we strategically manipulate how much sniffing and socializing our dog has done before we try our come when called at the park. Notice that this strategy of saturating our competition is diametrically opposed to old-school Pandora's box type arguments, where it was thought that if you let a dog sniff or play, he'll become untrainable. First of all, that's not humane. If you were a zoo and denied expression of species normal behaviors, you'd have picketers outside your establishment. And second of all, it's not how it works. These motivators are hydraulic. They wax and wane depending on how recently the dog has had some. Okay, let's proof. We're going to start proofing Lulu's downstay, and we're going to start easy with some dropped objects. Good girl. 1 for 1. Good girl. 2 for 2. Good girl. 3 for 3. Good girl. 4 for 4. Good girl. 5 for 5. I'm going to try now dropping a plate with some leftover beefy chili on it, and I'm going to be really ready to protect. If you think about it, this has got great overlap with the Leave It training that I've done with very tempting objects, and that's how these impulse control exercises inform each other. Good girl. 1 for 1. Clever girl. 2 for 2. Good girl. 3 for 3. Hammered down. Try this side. Clever girl. 4 for 4. Boy, and little bits are escaping off the plate, and she's still not even flinching. Quite something. Clever girl. Excellent. Okay, so next up is some thrown objects. So once objects are being thrown, they simulate prey a little bit. So if a dog's got any inclination to chase, it makes it, good girl, 1 for 1. Good girl, 2 for 2. Try ball. Good girl, 3 for 3. If your dog breaks and goes for the object, don't panic. Even if they acquire the object, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure that a great game does not ensue. We don't want to reinforce them for breaking their stay, but then repeat. And if you get a 2 for 5 or fewer, drop back to dropping again. And then one split you can do is a slightly less ballistic throw. Good girl, like that. But I'm going to give Lulu one more really good girl, exciting throw. Excellent. She's done so well at that. We're going to go ahead and push, and now we're going to push to social distractions. So we're first going to have a couple of men walk right by Lulu from forward and from backward to see if she can tolerate that distraction. Here we go. All right, gentlemen. My job is to keep my eyes open. Good girl. The point of reward is the point of where she, quote, should have broken. Now they're going to walk past the other way. Very good. Oh, so good. And one more time. Who's a very good girl. And back again. Here's a 4 for 4. And let's go ahead and get one more pass. Good girl. That time I got a head snap, which is lovely. And back they go. Excellent. She aced that 100%. If your dog had broken, again, no big deal. Just repeat, see what you get out of 5. And if necessary, increase the distance of the passersby, or we could have gone with one passerby, which is easier. Okay, now they're going to pass by, but this time they're going to be conversing with each other. Okay, here we go.
Well, this is my second.
Too bad. Too bad. So we're 0 for 1.
But she's in Florida now, so, but we've had her for
1 for 2. Excellent. And again.
a German Shepherd mix. We got her from a rescue. They weren't really sure. But
Good girl. 2 for 3.
plus something else. Plus something.
And pass again.
But she's good.
Good. 3 for 4. And final pass.
Yeah, but I could see her getting real hot.
Yeah, she doesn't like the summer, and she doesn't like the rain. For some reason, she doesn't go out in the rain. Yeah, she refuses to go out in the rain.
And back.
Want to dry off, I guess.
Yeah, and she just doesn't want to get wet, so I don't know. Like,
Excellent. So now we're going to up the ante and we're going to have our distractor come in and not only be close by, he's going to actually address Lulu. Okay, here we go.
What a well-behaved dog you are.
Good girl. Excellent. That's a 1 for 1. And again. Oh, too bad. It's a 1 for 2. And again.
Well, how fluffy you are.
Very
Hello there.
nice. Good girl. 2 for 3. This is hard for dogs. Dogs want to greet people when they come up.
What a pretty dog.
Good girl. There's a 3 for 4. Let's see if she actually gets a push trial. And finally, our final trial.
Well, hello there.
Oh, too bad. So that's a stick. So we're going to do one more set. This is really tough. Okay, Derek, when you're ready.
Well, hello there.
1 for 1. I was reloading, so that was a bit of a gimme for Lulu. Okay, she's 1 for 1. Let's do another.
Good morning.
Clever girl. Yes. Good girl. So if we were at a cafe or some outdoor place, this is something you can practice. Okay, again. We're on a 2 for 2 on our stick set.
Hello there.
Good girl. Very nice. And one more.
Good morning.
Oh, too bad. Too bad. That's terrible when that happens. Okay, we're 3 for 4, and our final rep.
Well, it's nice to see you.
Good girl. And Lulu had her first push, a 4 for 5, on a downstay with a social distraction. That's excellent. So what we're going to do now is push on and do a very similar process for sit stay. So now for our sit stay, which is a shorter duration stay, I'm going to commence proofing with my dropped objects. Oh, too bad. 0 for 1. Good girl. Good girl. Is that 1 for 3? Whoops. Dropped a bait. Excellent. Good girl. Who's good? 2 for 4. And a 3 for 5. Who's excellent? Very nicely done. Sit stay's a little bit less stable than down stay. It's a little less comfortable. They're a little more spring-loaded. Excellent. 1 for 1. 2 for 2. Reload. She's doing really nicely. These non-social distractions for most dogs are easier. Occasionally, if you've got a dog who's a fetch-o-maniac, these toy distractions are actually much tougher. Now that was a very innocent. She thought I was signaling it down. Who's a good girl? For 3. Good girl. 4 for 4. Do it. Whoops. Ooh. Kitty is talking to us. Double drop. 5 for 5. Okay, let me try some throws. Good girl. I got a little ear flinch, so she acknowledged the toy with her ears. Well, as a boy, something flew by there, but she held her stay like a champ. Good girl. There's a 2 for 2. I'm going to try this round rubbery ball. Good girl. Good girl. 3 for 3. Mr. Purple Squirrel. Let me get myself reloaded so I don't overshadow my throw. Good girl. 4 for 4. And finally, tennis ball. Oh, too bad. Luckily, I got lucky and she wasn't able to acquire the tennis ball. That's a 4 for 5 anyway, but I'm going to see if I can do one final rep on this other tennis ball just to get a bit of extra proof. Whoops. Clever girl. Good girl. Who's so good. Okay. So my next sit-stay distraction is patting, and this can be extremely loaded for a social dog. If your dog does not like strangers, I recommend that you practice this for yourself and your family members, the people who the dog likes, but don't do the step that I'm going to do after I warm up, which is have another person come in and pat her. So let's practice first. What a nice dog. 1 for 1. So she does her part of the bargain first, which is, what a nice dog. If your dog is sensitive about having their head pet, you can go with the, some of that old school, whatever you do, always, pat dogs on their chest or pat dogs under their chin, or who knows if any of that stuff is true. But individual dogs certainly have sensitivities. What a nice girl. There's a 5 for 5. And so now Derek, who is not a very familiar person to Lulu, is going to do what I just did. And what I'm expecting is that this is going to be much, much more difficult. So I'm ready. Okay, Derek, when you're ready, come in and give Lulu a pat. First, I need a sit-stay. She said, I've never in my life seen that signal. So I'm going to do this little prompt. Good girl. That's that staccato action prompt. Okay, here comes Derek.
Nice dog.
1 for 1. That was bordering on a miracle that she did that. And let's try again.
What a good girl.
There's a 2 for 2. And again.
Hello there.
3 for 3. It's quite something.
I'm impressed.
Me too. Okay, and one more.
Hello there.
Is she going to knock it out of the park with a home run? It's a 4 for 4, or do we get a stand-up triple? Let's see.
Hello there.
Oh, too bad. Stand-up triple. Let's try one more just for the sake of it.
Hello there.
Good. So we got a 5 for 6. It's in the park home run. Good girl. Thank you very much, Derek. And Lulu, you were just quite something else. So this, once again, is extremely difficult stuff. Once your dog has done sets with somebody who's familiar to the dog, but not too familiar, you can then opportunistically train this. So whenever somebody is willing to, say, can I pat your dog? Say, yes, of course you can. Set the dog up. And if possible, if the dog breaks the first trial, say, would you mind doing that again? And see if they can get the second trial right. So we're at the cold trial stage of this. Warmed up and cold are two different things. And we want our dogs to greet politely, to hold their sit stays cold. So where we would next go with Lulu is cold trials of people. So now we're going to switch gears and do some position generalization. Lulu's sits and downs now are pretty good. We're still working on shopping for verbals, but she's at a point now where we can start proofing. And our generalization games are fun to do and really get the idea in the dog's head that no matter what condition changes, the hand signal and cue for sit mean sit, and the hand signal and cue for down mean down. Very important when you're doing this kind of thing to get your order of events right. So I'm going to be issuing a verbal to Lulu no matter what I'm doing. I might be turning my back to her, I might be sitting in the chair, I might even be lying on the floor. It's really important that I issue the verbal cue, wait my couple of beats, and then do my best to issue whatever is her current level of hand signal. And in her case, they're fairly small hand signals, except for her sit from a down, which is a little bit broader. Okay, so let's see how she does. First thing I'm going to do is the easiest one, which is oblique to the dog. Down. Good. She actually flinched on the verbal, which is quite something. And I'm going to go with whatever she's giving me. I'm not going to try to do sets and train in order. This is really about mixing things up. Sit. Good girl. So she did an oblique sit for me. Try an oblique down again. Down. Good girl. Fancy pantsy. Sit. Good girl. That was nicely done. I'm going to try a down from stand. So I'm going to get her on her feet. Down. Good girl. That was a very nicely executed oblique. Down from stand. Down. Good girl. Whoops. Too bad. So oblique down from stand that way with the signal on the other hand on my left side was a problem. Down. Good girl. Now she guessed her way through that, okay? And we're going to talk about what these guesses are about later, but that she did it with reasonable latency, I'm satisfied for now. Let's try that one again. Down. Good girl. So that one's now a little bit warmed up, so I'm going to mix it up. Sit. Oh, couldn't fool her. Very nice. So I'm going to up the ante a little bit and try with my back to her. This can feel very awkward, and this is what it looks like. So you issue the command, and it's not always easy to get the dog behind you because they want to be. The best way to do it usually is to face a wall because then they can't position themselves. I'm going to do this, down, and then, good girl. I'm going to feed her like this. This is best the position feed as I can do. Sit. Clever girl. This is a really weird picture for dogs. Most of the time when we're training our dogs and issuing cues to them, they're kind of in this radius right here. Okay? And this is a very convenient way to really expand their horizons. Down. Good girl. Good girl. Lulu quite likes the puzzle aspect of this. What I'm getting from her face every time is, that seems slightly familiar, but I'm not quite sure what you're asking. I'm going to use my chair here to block her. Sit. Good girl. And do your best. If your dog, for instance, is at the level where they need a broader signal, it's perfectly okay, by the way, to issue the verbal, sit, and then give them a little more help. But do try to fade that out. Down. Good girl. Very nicely done. Sit. Whoops. Oh, do I give it to her or not? I'm going to give it to her. See if that turns out to have been a good decision. Down. Good girl. Sit. Clever girl. Good. Phew. I thought I might have trained in like a sit, stand, hiccup. One more time. Down. She guessed right. Who's a good girl? If you really want to be crafty, there is another variation you can do, which Lulu's not entirely ready for, but I'm going to show you so when your dog gets more advanced, you can do it. And that is, she's already in a down, and I go down. She got it right. Sometimes what dogs learn is they learn whatever position I'm in, it's probably the other one. Okay? When they're in a stand, certainly there's the choice of sit or down, but when they're in a down, the next one is usually sit. Okay? So next generalization idea I'm going to try is sitting in a chair. Remarkably, this can screw dogs up. I've seen many stays get broken as soon as the handler sits in a chair, or suddenly positions mean nothing. Sit. She's thinking. Very good. That was dog's thinking. I'm going to let her have it. I'm going to get her on her feet. Down. Good girl. Very good. Sit. Good girl. God, dogs are cute. Sit. Good girl. That was excellent. She's doing very nicely at this. I'm going to do a couple more, and then I'm going to go for broke. I'm going to try on the floor, and that's really tough. Down. Good girl. Down. Good girl. Even jumped the prompt. Okay, so here it is. The final can be quite hilarious. Sometimes when you do this, it prompts the dog to start playing, start licking you, what have you. But I'm going to go ahead and lie on the floor and see if I can get Lulu to change positions. Okay, here we are. Sit. Very understandable error, because I am down here. Oh, good girl. Well, kind of good girl. Sit. She's actually doing a little better than many dogs. A lot of dogs don't even try. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm a 0 for 2. I'm going to try one more time, and then I'm going to do a split. Get her up. Sit. Good girl! I'm a 1 for 3. Who knew? Get her up. Send her over there. Sit. Good girl. Very nice. Get her up. This is sit from a stand we're working on. I'm not going to mix it up because this is such a hard variation. Sit. She says, this can't possibly work when people are lying on the floor. Let me send her away. Back she comes. Sit. Good girl. Her face is priceless. And there's a 4 for 5 on the most difficult variation. I'm going to just try one down just for the heck of it. And then we're going to move on and see if she can do a slightly cooled off sit stay for a novel person patting her. Down. She says, that one's easier. Down is a little bit more intuitive, but not for all dogs. All righty, so our next variation is going to be, she is a little bit cooled off. We've done some in this session. We did sit stay earlier, but she's been playing generalization games now. And so that's gotten her a little bit out of stay for social distraction mode. And we're going to be using a brand new person. So let's see how she does. So now we're going to practice with a brand new person to see if Lulu can hold her sit stay for patting. Okay, Rob. Good girl, Lulu. Very nice. There's 1 for 1. And so Rob is now going to try again. Good girl. Wow. Very well done. 2 for 2. And again. Girl. 3 for 3. We're very proud of our Lulu. Okay, one more. Oh, too bad. There's an error. So she's a 3 for 4. Good girl. Okay, so we're on a 3 for 4. Let's see if we get our in the park home run. Clever girl. Good girl, Lulu. So she scored a 4 for 5 on a slightly cooled off, brand new person sit stay for social distraction. That's excellent. We're going to quit for today. There is an interesting but startling truth here, which we touched on very early in this course and which now comes into play, and it is this. Dogs never actually know sit or any other behavior we train. There's only varying degrees of fluency. The probability of a dog sitting on cue can be high or low or something in the middle. Your dog's probability of sitting on cue is much higher now, but he doesn't know sit the way you know who the first president was. So when people say to me, my dog knows sit, I usually nod politely because who wants to be pedantic in casual conversation? But what I want to say is, ooh, you are thinking about this wrong. It is the path of madness to frame dogs doing what we want on cue as knowledge. All we can do is stack the probability deck. There are no 100% in dog behavior. You can be the best trainer in the world with the cleverest dog ever, and all you can do is greatly increase the probability that he will sit when you ask him to. It's a humbling business applied behavior. But if we practice, the reliability of our dog's performance really soars, and this opens up a wide world to your dog.